right? Thanking God for the way that he gives us lasting remedies to the things that ail us, especially spiritually. Let's call Acts chapter 20 symptoms. Understanding that in life, there are times we can seek remedies that simply deal with our symptoms and not our underlying conditions. In a chapter that starts out in the first 6 verses with Paul moving on from Ephesus to Macedonia, encouraging the churches throughout. Going on, though, to Greece, he's going to be there for 3 months. But as we've seen in the typical pattern where preaching leads to opposition, which deepens into actual persecution, it's going to get a condensed treatment here where we're simply going to see a plot develop after that 3 months, causing him to go ahead and keep it moving, this time back through Macedonia with some of the brothers from his previous work, or the work he's done in previous places that, in spite of the persecution, has produced results. And so with him are going to go brothers from Berea and Thessalonica, Derbe and Asia, and along with them, Timothy, some of which are going to go ahead to Troas, where he is going to meet them, as we'll see in verses 7 through 16 in a relatively famous passage that says, from Troas, or at Troas, on the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul spoke to them, prolonging his speech until midnight. It's going to, however, create the problem that one of the young men listening to Paul is going to fall asleep. But even worse, he is going to fall asleep from the 3rd floor, from which he is going to fall actually to his death. But that's going to provide the chance for Paul to show the work of the power of God again, as Paul is going to be able to revive the young man. And no little bit comforted, they are going to then prolong their conversation with Paul over until daybreak. But once again, Paul is going to have a party that is going to go ahead of him, this time to Assos. As we see in verses 13 through 16, Paul is going to meet them as together they are going to go from Assos to a place called Miletus, where he is going to have bypassed a stopover in Ephesus to encourage them as well, in hopes of getting back to Jerusalem by the day of Pentecost. But from Miletus, he is going to call the Ephesian elders to himself to make another relatively famous address in verses 17 through 38, the end of the chapter, where during his goodbye to the Ephesian elders, he is going to recount his time there, how he lived among them, how he likewise did not shrink back from speaking the truth to both the Hebrews and the Greeks. Likewise, he is saying that he is going on to Jerusalem in much uncertainty, except for understanding that affliction awaits him ahead there. But he is going to recall that regardless of the affliction ahead, he spoke the whole counsel of God during his time with them. And likewise, on that basis, he is going to charge them that going forward, they need to pay careful attention to the flock over which they are overseers, understanding that he is going to warn them that after his departure, what he describes as, at least in the ESV, what he describes as fierce wolves are going to arise even from among them. And understanding that he is only talking to the elders, it seems that he is saying fierce wolves are going to arise even from amongst the elders. Some speaking twisted words with the motivation of having their own disciples from within the body of Christ, which really only has room for disciples of Christ and no one else. And within that body, we all have the responsibility to give everyone a better picture of who Christ is. And as one of my instructors helped me understand in teaching me the book of Colossians, a letter written by Paul back to the church at Colossae, he said the simple math of Colossians chapter 1 is Christ plus nothing. But Christ himself identified the problem in Israel during his day, and that is the way that the disciples of those like the chief priests, the Pharisees, the scribes, etc., felt so much pressure to agree with their perspective on life that they couldn't hear the basic truth that Christ, the Son of God, was actually trying to get them to understand about God, which likewise might be the reason why he warned many of them, if not all of them, that people like the tax collectors and the prostitutes were actually entering the kingdom before they were. Because even though those people were commonly known as sinners, they were able to listen to the words of God without the additional baggage of those who felt the pressure to try to fit God's words into the belief system of many they looked up to. Understanding that as Paul is leaving the Ephesian elders, he is warning them about what sounds like a very similar danger, as he is warning about the danger of some of them having their own disciples in a church that only has room for disciples of Christ. And even though they may never fall into the temptation that Paul is going to warn the church at Corinth about, to literally call themselves of either Paul or of Apollos, there may be a low-key danger, as we saw Christ warning about, of them trying to fit the truth of Christ into the belief system of those who they look up to. A distraction the Apostle Paul may know all too well, understanding that not long ago he was better known as Saul, the one who, in trying to serve God in a way that would please the Pharisees, actually attracted the anger of God, only to realize that after he legitimately made God his priority, God established him in places far beyond Jerusalem to bless him with the respect and affection of many throughout that part of the world. An affection that came with the simple math of, as my instructor said, Christ plus nothing. Being able to genuinely understand the things that Christ was telling us about God without the baggage of having to fit the truth of Christ through the expectations and the belief systems of others. Understanding that the pressure we feel to fit Christ within the expectations and even the opinions of others may be a symptom of something we mention from time to time, and that is the degree to which we found comfort in people pleasing and lost the comfort that comes from